It wasn't until I realized that you cannot save your way to wealth. You have to learn how to invest.
Crystina, thank you so much for joining us. Tell me a little bit about yourself and your background.
Hi, thank you so much for having me here. So I am an educator. I used to teach high school math and I was a math professor. And along my journey, I realized that there's a lack of financial literacy education. And I also noticed that within schools, and I also noticed that parents, they want to teach their children about money, but they just don't know how to. So I have a business where I educate parents and kids on financial literacy education. And my biggest goal is to make sure that money is not a taboo topic in the house. So I kind of guide parents to make sure that they can ask the right questions and kind of just lead into talking about money more naturally. And yeah, so I love doing that.
I like the focus you have on the parents. When they start that educational journey with financial education, where do you point them to start?
Yeah, so a common question that I actually get from parents is, when can I start educating my child on financial literacy education? And I actually say starting at age 3, when kids can start talking, you can educate them. And I don't mean any complicated investing type of questions, right? But there are studies that show that children know the difference between wants and needs starting at age 3. And because money is so behavior related and discipline, that's the perfect time. But if you're still a parent with older kids and you're wondering how I can get started, it doesn't really matter what age your child is. You can still start there. Start talking about discipline and behavior with your child.
You mentioned age 3, and
Yes.
I like what you're citing with the study, the difference between wants and needs. We speak a lot about that with older individuals. Are there any other major age milestones with children that parents should be aware of for having money conversations?
That's a great question. So yes, by age 7, technically, kids have enough financial literacy skills just by watching their parents that will build upon into their adult life. And a lot of times we think we're not talking to our kids about money, but they are watching our every move when it comes to money. So already by age 7, even if you haven't spoken to your child about money, they have enough skills to carry on into adult life.
That sounds to me like parents are modeling behaviors.
That's correct.
Are there any financial behaviors you encourage parents to show to their children to start setting them on the right path for financial education?
Yes. So the biggest thing that I would say, and probably the most challenging for parents, is to delay gratification. And I think it's the most challenging because we're in this society where we want to get things quickly. And especially the way our kids are being raised, they're seeing parents order things online and get them within a day or 2 days. And so I think it's really being intentional when you're talking to your children to make sure that you are showing them that you are delaying gratification. So if there's something that you want, you tell them, this is what I want and I'm going to save up on it. You know, every paycheck I'm putting this aside. So they see that you're not just with a click of a button getting something within 2 days because you need it.
You mentioned that you are an educator. Where did you see the biggest gaps in education when it comes to financial literacy?
Yes. So my biggest challenge with financial literacy education is actually that although many states are requiring a graduation class, you know, in order to graduate, you do need a financial literacy class in many states, but it's only one semester. And so our kids are only getting one semester within their 4 years of high school. And I personally think that's just not enough. You know, for math and for literacy, science, social studies, they're getting that every year. But for something that I believe, and I'm a math educator, but for something that I believe is going to be used on a much more constant basis than what the things that you learn in math class, we are not teaching our kids enough. So that's the biggest challenge.
For parents that want to extend that educational journey for their children, what would you recommend for them?
Yes, so I love that there's so many resources nowadays. And so I would definitely encourage parents to go on the journey with their children, which I know sometimes that could be a challenge because sometimes parents want to be confident enough to talk about something. But I would suggest for them to go on podcasts, to watch YouTube videos, to read books along with their children of financial literacy topics.
You talk about podcasts, YouTube videos, books. As you think about your own journey, who have been some of the influences for you?
Yes. So one of my favorite podcasts is actually Earn Your Leisure. And it's funny enough because during the pandemic, I was listening to a lot of podcasts. And while I was listening to that podcast, specifically, they have every Monday, they talk about the market. And so I'm learning more about investing, how to do things on your own, and talking about stocks. And so it was actually through a series of listening to those podcasts in the car with my children that soon after that, my 7-year-old, he was 7 at the time, he asked me if I could open up a brokerage account for him and start investing. And actually, that is what inspired me to open up my own financial literacy business, to start educating parents, teachers, kids, and so forth, because I realized that he was picking it up just naturally, right? Just because I'm open enough to talk about money, I'm open enough to have this podcast playing in the car, and he really wanted to get more information. And so, yeah, I definitely encourage parents to be open with their kids and also be vulnerable, right, to show them that you're also learning as well.
When you think about opening up a brokerage account and starting investing, what are some of the features that you're looking for in a financial app?
Yes, that's a great question. So I really like the idea of having a brokerage account for children, because I think about so many gifts that the children get for their birthday and for Christmas. I have seen the kids not play with them after a short period of time. And so I have been big on, for example, I do have a 529 plan for my kids. And so getting a link for a 529 plan and being able to share it with family and friends. So ideally, maybe another type of brokerage account that could provide some type of link for gift giving would be awesome.
When parents are thinking about their family budget, how should they think about incorporating investing into that budget?
Yes. So I think you have to think, what is it that you want to have? What is a goal in mind? And then kind of work backwards. So if you plan to have a certain amount of money invested, if you want to have a certain amount of money for your kids' college account, how can you figure out what that money is and then work backwards? And you can use an investing calculator online to be able to do that math for you.
And when you're keeping up with the markets and you're thinking about stocks and investment options, what resources are you using to stay up to date?
Yes. So as an educator, I'm always looking online. I listen to podcasts, but there's a lot of research online to go to, certain websites, credible websites to go to. So I'm always trying to get the best research from that area. But I also don't go too crazy. I'm not, on a regular basis looking into that, because I believe in investing for the long term. And so I don't want certain things to kind of like affect my decisions on investing,
You have a unique background. You're an educator and you're speaking with other education professionals. How do you start the money conversation with them?
Yes. So actually, a lot of my educator friends, they know that I do these financial workshops at other schools. And just recently, they asked if I can do a workshop for them, because as educators, we're really busy. They have lesson plans, after school, grading. Your job is never complete. So you can always think about how to be a better teacher, what you can do. You're always analyzing how the lesson went. And so I think it's so crucial for educators to be educated more on, their pension and their retirement plan. And so a lot of them, they are looking for guidance in that area. So I will, I can pinpoint them to certain podcasts or pinpoint them to certain websites, but really they want somebody to show them, and to educate them either through a webinar or in person, because that's usually how they learn best.
Sometimes having a conversation and talking about budgeting and investing can be difficult for parents. What tips do you offer to parents that may have difficulty starting that conversation with their kids?
Yes. So a lot of times people look at investing as complicated because they might not know terminology. Now, I would say that it's actually not so complicated, right? Once you understand. And I think when people really understand the concept and they understand like compound interest and they're coming from this conceptual understanding point, then it makes sense to them. But a lot of times people are just too intimidated. And so even when we think about a retirement goal or an emergency fund and people find out what that large number is, people kind of step back and say, no, I can't do that, because they're not looking at a consistent basis. Like you can save and you can invest, like starting off small. So that's usually my biggest tip, is I say you can start investing with $1 nowadays. You couldn't do that before, but now you can, so take advantage.
How do you balance your long-term financial goals with the money that you're earning and enjoying the moment?
Yes. So I have a goal in mind to retire by a certain age. So I think it makes it more simple when you have a plan in place to kind of let that money sit and you watch that grow. I also own a few rental properties. So knowing that it's going to appreciate within a certain amount of time, or even with my own stocks, knowing that I have some time for it to sit, it's going to grow. So once you have a plan in place, it's pretty simple not to take money from that or cut your own investments short. And I would also say automation is key. So when you have your automation in place, you don't feel like you're missing out on that money. Just like, money gets pulled out for health insurance or for other expenses, right? So I look at it as the same way.
You talked about automation is key. What tips do you have for people to set up an automated strategy so that that money's going into a brokerage account?
Yes. So many platforms, you can set it up that way. So you can set aside a certain percentage, or you can set aside a certain amount of money. So again, kind of working backwards, and you can feel free to start small at first. And then again, when you start seeing the power of investing and how your money is compounding, I think that's the goal. So once you see that start kicking in, then you're going to naturally want to start investing more.
How do you ensure the information online is credible?
Yes, that's a great question, because a lot of times people go to even social media for advice, and people go to different websites because, somebody suggested it. So I would definitely encourage to go to credible sources, right? And I would share those sources with people as well. And I think it's really important. There is great tips that are provided on social media, but you have to be able to kind of challenge everything, right? And so let it be this curiosity that gets you to maybe read more books or listen to somebody else's opinion on it. So I wouldn't just take one thing, but allow that one thing to spark curiosity for you to then go research this topic even more in different places.
You mentioned starting the investment conversation at 3 with some children. Can you take us through your own journey and when you really fell in love and developed a passion for investing?
Yes. So I will say that I wasn't a great investor in the beginning, but I was a great saver. So my mom is actually a CPA. So growing up, I saw her always budgeting, and she was always on top of talking about money in an open way. And so I had that habit from a really early age, and I make sure I do the same thing with my own children. Now, I will say that I felt like I wasn't financially whole, like completely financially literate, until I got the investing part down pat. So I was great at saving. I was really good at saving up a certain amount of money, having midterm goals, long-term goals, and so forth at a really young age. I actually had a journal of where I was keeping track of my savings so I can save for a car by the age of 16. So I had that down pat. But then it wasn't until I realized that you cannot save your way to wealth. You have to learn how to invest. And once I learned that, which was later, then I felt like I was more financially literate, financially whole.
Thinking to your own journey, and particularly gaining the knowledge about investing, what knowledge do you wish that you had had at an earlier age to be introduced to investing?
Yes. So I feel like the best thing that I could have been introduced to was an investing calculator. If I would have seen, and I'm a math person, I know about compound interest, but nobody had ever presented it in a way of money growing. So I feel like if our math educators can incorporate that, and I feel like if I would have learned that at an earlier age, that would have set me up a lot quicker, because I mean, every time that I talk to somebody who has learned to invest, the biggest regret is always not investing sooner, right? So I feel like if we can educate our youngest population of kids, then they know better and then they can make that decision.